The woman he left me for? She's now locked in my basement. And her life, her job, her name, her everything is mine. It all started with a hairbrush. Not even his shirt, not lipstick on a glass. It was that stupid, pink, rhinestone-studded hairbrush I found in the glove compartment of his car. The one with her initials, CB, carved on the back, like a teenager branding her territory. My name is Emily Vaughn, or at least it used to be. I lived in that name for 9 years of marriage. The devoted wife, the silent partner, the one who stood beside Dr. James Vaughn, orthopedic surgeon and neighborhood golden boy. I organized the charity galas, baked the Christmas cookies, played my role so well I forgot it was a role. Until he replaced me. Her name was Chloe Bellemere, 28, tanned, toned, and terrifyingly flawless. She was everything I wasn't anymore. I didn't even notice when the lies started. James was working late, covering a colleague, on call. I believed it, because I was stupid. But the hairbrush, that made it real. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't confront him. I didn't scream or throw plates. I made tea. I sat down. I opened my laptop, and I started researching her. Within a week, I knew everything. Where she lived, a penthouse condo downtown. Where she worked, marketing exec at a luxury skincare brand. Her gym schedule. Her mother's name. The name of the dog she abandoned after college. She took my husband. I was going to take everything else. But not like you think. I wasn't going to key her car or slash her tires. I didn't want to make her cry. I wanted her to disappear, so I could be her. It took planning, patience, disgusting patience. First, I changed my hair, darker, sharper. Then I bought the same perfume she used, Chanel Chance. Started running on her trail, copied her nail color. Nobody noticed, but I did. I was stepping into her skin. Then came the hard part, removal. She jogged every morning at 6 a.m. Always the same park, same path, same routine. She wore noise-canceling earbuds. Dumb. It was foggy that Tuesday. I followed her step by step. Close, closer. She never looked back. When I struck, she barely had time to gasp. No blood, just a needle, just a few seconds. She dropped like a puppet cut from strings. She woke up in my basement. I had already prepared the room, soundproofed, camera installed, mattress, food, a toilet. I'm not a monster. I wasn't going to kill her. I just needed her out of the way, temporarily. That's when I began becoming her, officially. I forged documents, altered files, hacked her email. I watched her work meetings and mimicked her tone. I updated my resume and showed up at her office with a perfect explanation. Hi, I'm Chloe. I had a rough week, but I'm back. No one questioned it. She worked remote often. Her boss hadn't seen her in weeks. In public, I was her, and it felt so good. The attention, the admiration, the whispers. People looked at me the way they used to look at her. James, he didn't even recognize me. Until I made him. It was a Friday. I called him, using her voice, her number. Hey, it's Chloe. I think we should talk. He came to her condo. The look in his eyes, lust, regret, hunger. It made me want to vomit, but I played along. We had wine, we talked. He touched my hand. I smiled, and when he leaned in to kiss me, I let him, just long enough. Then I whispered, "Does my mouth feel familiar, James?" He froze. I pulled back, looked him straight in the eyes. "It's Emily, you bastard." His face went pale, and then I smiled, the real kind. Because that was just the beginning. He didn't say a word for nearly a full minute. James just stared at me like I'd returned from the dead, like a ghost wearing Chloe's perfume. His jaw clenched, his hands curled into tight fists on his lap. The silence between us was thick enough to suffocate. Then, finally, he spoke. "What the hell kind of game is this?" I leaned back on the sofa, crossed my legs, her legs. I wore the same silk robe she'd posted on Instagram last Valentine's Day. Red, short, slippery. "This isn't a game, James," I said coolly. "It's a correction." His eyes flicked to the wine glass I'd poured him. "Did you drug me?" I laughed, a little too loudly. "If I wanted you unconscious, you'd be on the floor right now." He stood, pacing, fuming. "What do you want, Emily?" "What I want?" I echoed, tilting my head. "I want you to understand how easy it is to disappear." He stopped mid-step. "Chloe's gone," I said, watching the panic ripple across his expression. "No one's seen her in 2 weeks. Not her friends, not her coworkers, not her family." "You're bluffing," he said, but his voice cracked. "Go ahead, call her, message her, knock on her door. I dare you." He looked at me, really looked, the full weight of the situation sinking in. And then, for the first time in our entire marriage, he looked scared of me. Good, because he should be. Chloe's absence had been carefully managed. I'd sent a resignation email from her work address claiming a sudden decision to take a sabbatical and unplug. I forwarded her calls, deleted her Instagram, canceled her yoga classes. Her digital footprint faded like a vanishing signal. Meanwhile, I was doing better as her than she'd ever done. Clients adored me. Her best friend, Lexi, believed every lie I fed her about a spiritual retreat. Even Chloe's ex, whom she still messaged on the side, by the way, sent me a half-drunk voice memo at 2 a.m. begging for another chance. Pathetic. Each night, after playing Chloe by day, I would return to my house, our house, where Chloe was locked below the floorboards in the soundproof cellar James never knew I had installed after my father passed. She would scream, sometimes cry, sometimes try to beg. I'd let her talk for a while. I recorded everything. Not for blackmail, just documentation. On day 13, she broke. "I'll disappear," she whimpered. "Just let me go. I won't tell anyone, please." I knelt beside her mattress, handed her a glass of water, and smiled. "But you already disappeared, Chloe. Haven't you noticed?" Her face contorted, pale, smudged mascara, her once flawless cheekbones now gaunt. She wasn't perfect anymore. She was real now. James came back the next night. This time angrier, wilder. He barged into the condo and slammed the door behind him. "What do you want from me?" "Why did you do it?" I asked calmly. He laughed bitterly. "You really want to talk about why?" "Yes," I said. "I do." He looked at me with disgust. "Because you stopped being fun, Emily. You were boring, predictable. You stopped trying. I wanted something different." Something inside me cracked, but not like a broken thing, like a shell. "Different," I repeated. "You wanted different." He nodded. "Yeah, and I regret nothing." I smiled. "You will." The next morning, I sent a tip, anonymous, to the HR department of Chloe's company, implicating her in financial mismanagement. I attached falsified spreadsheets, digital fingerprints carefully altered to match her devices. They opened an internal investigation within 48 hours. Her reputation? Gone. Her accounts? Frozen. Her name? Stained. I waited another day before I sent James the envelope. It contained a photo, Chloe, in the basement, eyes wide, face terrified, time-stamped. And a note. "You have 72 hours to confess to your affair, or this goes public." He called me 9 minutes later. "You're insane." "I'm just getting started," I said, and hung up. At 3 a.m., I went downstairs. Chloe was awake, staring at the ceiling. She whispered, "Are you going to kill me?" I crouched beside her, gently brushed the hair from her face.
"No, sweetheart. You're already dead. I just haven't buried you yet." She sobbed, and I let her. Because when someone takes your life, your love, your name, you don't just take it back.
You take everything. I didn't force him to confess. I gave him a choice, truth or ruin. He chose ruin, so I gave the world both. The morning James's affair went public was the day the Vaughn name stopped being pristine. It began with a press release. Not a messy social media rant, not an Instagram story with crying filters. I paid a PR firm in Manhattan, quietly, to draft the perfect exposé. Tasteful, clinical, devastating. Dr. James Vaughn, prominent orthopedic surgeon, accused of professional misconduct and personal scandal involving a 28-year-old marketing executive, Chloe Bellemere. Anonymous sources allege a long-running affair during his marriage to Emily Vaughn, who has since filed for separation. I didn't file for separation, of course, but the media didn't know that, yet. By noon, the article had made rounds across Facebook groups, hospital gossip chains, and local news blogs. By dinner, hospital administration put James on temporary leave pending review. And by midnight, James showed up at Chloe's penthouse looking like he'd crawled through hell. His blazer was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his voice hoarse. "You did this," he hissed. I was sipping rosé on the balcony, wearing Chloe's black lace robe, shorter than anything I used to wear. I didn't look up. "You did this to yourself, James." He stormed toward me, grabbed my arm, but I didn't flinch. "I lost 2 surgeries today," he growled. "Do you know what that costs me? Less than what I lost when I found her lipstick on your boxers." His grip tightened. "Don't ever touch me again," I said, my voice like a blade. "Or the next headline will include the words domestic violence." He froze, then dropped my arm like it burned him. "You're unhinged." "No," I said, standing. "I'm just finally awake." Chloe's life was unraveling behind her closed basement door. Her friends were beginning to panic, calls stacking up. I answered a few in her voice, said she needed space and was deeply ashamed of what she'd done. People love a woman in crisis. It gives them something to gossip about at brunch. But that wasn't enough. I needed Chloe to disappear on paper, too. So I forged a resignation letter from her entire life. Sent it to her landlord, to her boss, to her alumni association, even her yoga studio. Then I opened a bank account under her name, rerouted the little money she had left, a few thousand, nothing compared to what she helped steal from me. I emptied her world one thread at a time, while mine expanded. I started hosting brunches as Chloe. I met with investors for her skincare brand. I flirted with men at networking events who called me magnetic. I smiled in ways Emily Vaughn never dared. No one suspected a thing, not even her mother. Yes, I met her mother. Her name was Linda, and she invited me for tea after a mutual connection reintroduced us. "My daughter's always been a bit impulsive," she said. "But you seem calmer these days, Chloe, like you've matured." I smiled. "Thank you, I've been working on myself." "You look different too. Better, actually." Cutting out toxic men tends to help. Linda laughed, a little too hard, and I realized she never liked James. She just liked the fantasy of her daughter marrying a doctor. And now she was looking at me like the fantasy could still be real. Later that night, I went down to the basement again. Chloe was huddled in the corner. She didn't scream anymore. She barely spoke. Just watched me, studying me, like a shadow looking in a mirror. "You met my mom," she said, voice raw. "Yes." She didn't. "No." Chloe laughed, just once, but it was hollow. "You really think you can live as me forever?" I knelt down. "No," I said. "I don't have to live as you forever.
just long enough for everyone else to forget who you ever were. She opened her mouth to speak, but stopped, because she knew this wasn't about becoming her.
It was about erasing her. The next morning, I took a walk. The sun was gentle, the wind light, and for the first time in months, I felt peace. Then my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I answered. "Emily Vaughn?" the voice asked. "Yes." "This is Detective Michelle Reyes from the NYPD. We'd like to ask you a few questions." I paused. "What about?" "It's regarding a missing persons report filed for a Chloe Bellemere. You're listed as one of her recent known associates." My heart didn't skip. It slammed. But I smiled. "Of course," I said calmly, happy to help. Because I already knew what I'd say. They say the devil wears Prada, but when I opened the door to that detective, I wore Chloe's smile, and hell had never looked so innocent. The knock came at exactly 8:03 a.m. I was ready. Hair in loose curls, minimal makeup, just enough to look polished, not hiding. An oversized sweater hanging slightly off one shoulder. The scent of Chanel Chance lingered in the air. I looked like a woman who'd just returned from a yoga retreat and rediscovered her sense of self. I opened the door slowly, casually. Detective Michelle Reyes stood there, crisp and sharp in a fitted blazer and slate gray slacks. Mid-40s, with shrewd eyes and an unreadable mouth. The kind of woman who could smell guilt before you even breathed it. "Emily Vaughn?" she asked. "Yes," I said, tilting my head like I was surprised to see her. "Come in." She didn't smile. She stepped inside, surveyed the condo with quiet calculation. I had staged the place carefully. A few self-help books on the coffee table, untouched green juice in the fridge, a candle burning that read, "Let that shit go." She sat across from me and opened a small notebook. "We're looking into a missing person, Chloe Bellemere. You were listed in her phone under M with several recent call logs." I blinked slowly. "Yes, Chloe and I became friendly recently. We were both going through difficult relationships. We bonded." "Difficult?" the detective echoed. I nodded, leaning forward. "Her boyfriend, my husband, same man." That made her pause. "You're saying they were having an affair?" "They were," I said. "He left me for her. I guess that connected us in a twisted way." Detective Reyes scribbled something, then looked back up. "When's the last time you saw Chloe?" I furrowed my brow, pretending to think. 3 weeks ago. She was distant, said she needed space. She looked tired. Said something about disappearing for a while to get her head straight." The detective's pen stopped. "And you believed her?" "I wanted to," I whispered, "but honestly, I thought she might be suicidal." Silence bloomed between us like a poisonous flower. "You didn't report it?" "I thought it wasn't my place," I said, folding my hands. "She wasn't my friend, not really. Just someone who understood pain." Detective Reyes nodded slowly, but I could tell she didn't buy it completely. Her eyes wandered toward a framed photo on the shelf. It was me and James, from our 5th anniversary trip. We were smiling. Fake, of course, but believable. "You still live here?" she asked. "No," I lied. "I'm just cleaning up, selling it. Too many memories." She stood. "We may need to follow up." "Of course," I said. "Anything I can do." She left. And I exhaled. I went straight to the basement. Chloe sat against the wall, knees drawn to her chest. Her skin was dull now, her hair tangled. She looked up, sluggish. "They're asking questions," I told her. She didn't respond. Detective came by. Still nothing. I crouched down. "Do you want this to end?" She looked up. Her eyes were sunken, but clear. "Yes." "Then you need to help me." A pause. "With what?" she rasped. I smiled. "With erasing you, officially."
Over the next 3 days, I coached her, fed her better, let her shower, gave her a pen and notebook.
I told her to write a note, a confession, something that sounded raw, unhinged, but believable, a suicide letter that fit the narrative I'd already sown. She fought it at first. But I reminded her, you'll be found eventually, and the longer she lived, the more likely someone would hear her. That detective, she wasn't going away. So Chloe wrote, a shaky, desperate letter that said, I ruined a marriage, I ruined myself, I can't live with it anymore. Goodbye. I took the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and mailed it, overnight, to her mother. The next morning, Linda Bellemere collapsed in her kitchen. The suicide note was all over the local news within hours. Detective Reyes called me again. Did she mention wanting to hurt herself? She did, I said solemnly. I didn't think she meant it. God, I should have done something. You weren't the only one who missed the signs, she said. But I could hear it, that sliver of suspicion still flickering under her words. That night, I toasted myself with Chloe's favorite wine. I'd almost won. Until the doorbell rang. When I opened it, James stood there. He looked different, broken, rage bubbling under grief. You sent the letter, he said. I tilted my head. Excuse me. You killed her. She killed herself, James. He stepped closer, inches from my face. I don't know what game you're playing, but if I find out you had anything to do with her, you'll what? I whispered. He blinked. I leaned in. You left me for a child who couldn't handle guilt, and now you want someone to blame for her weakness? He stared at me, like he didn't recognize me. Because he didn't. The Emily he cheated on was dead. All that remained was vengeance. They buried her memory, but I buried her body, far deeper than they could ever reach. The press called her a tragic figure. Chloe Bellemere, 28, a rising star in luxury marketing, torn apart by scandal, lost to depression. They published glowing obituaries with glamour shot headshots. Friends posted tearful tributes. She was so full of life. We should have known. None of them really knew her. They didn't know the narcissism under the perfect cheekbones, the smug little smile she wore whenever she saw James touch her in public, while I stood just a few feet away. They didn't know she laughed when she stole him. I did. And now, I was the one people mourned without realizing. The funeral was a private affair, family only. A closed casket, how convenient when there's no body. They claimed she jumped into the river, left her phone, shoes, and a note behind. The water took the rest. I made sure it looked that way. I floated a pair of her heels downstream one foggy dawn, smashed her phone, and left it on a ledge near the water, next to a bouquet of wilted white lilies. The police didn't even try too hard. Pretty women who write perfect suicide notes don't get autopsies. They get legends. Detective Reyes wasn't buying it completely. She showed up at the funeral in plain clothes, blended in among the mourners like a shadow. She didn't approach me, just watched. I gave her a show, crying quietly, clinging to Chloe's mother like we were sisters in grief. I squeezed tears from dry eyes and whispered, I miss her so much. Linda sobbed into my shoulder. I almost felt guilty. Almost. But then I looked across the room and saw James, alone, wearing black, haunted. He hadn't spoken to me in days, not since our last confrontation. But now his eyes lingered on mine like a question he was too afraid to ask. I turned away first, because the next step in my plan didn't involve forgiveness. It involved destruction. That night, I went back to the basement. She was still alive, barely. The letter had worked. The world believed she was dead, which meant now she could really disappear, forever. She looked up when I opened the door. Her voice cracked. Did they have the funeral? Yes. Did James come? He cried, I lied, begged for forgiveness. It was pathetic. She curled up tighter on the mattress, trembling. "You said I could go," she whispered. "I did," I said, and I meant it, just not in the way she hoped. 3 nights later, I drove her, bound and silent, to a remote cabin my father used to hunt in, deep in the woods. No neighbors, no cell service, just silence and frost. I left her there. No chains, no locks. Just 4 walls and a canister of food that could last her 2 weeks if she rationed carefully. She could survive, if she wanted to. Or she could prove to the world that her suicide was real. It didn't matter to me anymore, because Chloe Bellemere, to the public, was gone, and I had taken her life and made it something better. I returned to the city and stepped fully into the new identity. I gave interviews, launched a new skincare line in her name, moved into a bigger condo, became the face of resilience. People admired me, envied me. Even James couldn't resist. He showed up again, this time with flowers, with apologies, with regret in his eyes and desire in his voice. "I can't stop thinking about you." I tilted my head. "You mean her?" "No," he said. "I mean you, now." And that was the moment I knew I'd won, because the man who threw me away was now begging for something that was never his to begin with. I let him sleep in my bed that night, let him touch the body of the woman he thought he understood, let him say, "I missed you." And right before he fell asleep, I whispered, "Good, because soon you'll miss everything." He kissed me like I was hers, touched me like I was new. But when he whispered, "I love you," I realized he didn't know who I was anymore. And that was the most powerful feeling of all. The morning after he came back, James made me coffee. In Chloe's kitchen, using Chloe's mug, while I stood barefoot in Chloe's robe, pretending the taste of him didn't still linger on my skin like a brand. He acted like nothing had happened, like I hadn't been his wife for 9 years, like he hadn't torn me apart piece by piece, only to crawl back when the girl he threw me away for vanished into mist. "Sleep okay?" he asked, stirring sugar like we were in some cozy honeymoon phase. I nodded. "I forgot how good you smell in the morning." I smiled, pretending I didn't want to throw the mug in his face. But now, I was studying him. Every word, every blink, every lie wrapped in charm. He didn't love me. He never did. He just missed being admired. And I was his favorite mirror. Over the next few days, James returned to my life like a virus in remission. Slow, subtle, waiting to flare. He brought groceries, took me out to dinner, slept beside me with a hand always resting somewhere on my body, like he needed to own it again. But I didn't let him back into my heart, only my bed, because I had something he wanted, familiarity, and he had something I wanted, guilt. One night, we lay in silence, and I said softly, "Do you think about her?" He didn't move. "Sometimes," he said finally, "but not the way you think." "How do I think?" He sighed, like she was some siren, some spell. "Wasn't she?" He turned to look at me. "She wasn't you." And I almost laughed, because he meant it as a compliment, but all I heard was weakness. Meanwhile, Detective Reyes hadn't disappeared. I spotted her twice in the same week. Once near the yoga studio I now frequented, once parked outside the condo. She wasn't just investigating Chloe anymore. She was investigating me. So I played it smarter, made donations to a mental health charity in Chloe's name, posted about survivor's guilt, gave an interview about reclaiming my identity after betrayal. The public devoured it. Strong women rise from ashes. Heartbreak to healing, Emily Vaughn's second life begins. And Detective Reyes? She couldn't do anything without evidence. And I'd buried every trace of it. Until the phone call. It came one night as James and I were curled up watching a documentary, his idea of romance. Unknown number. I stepped onto the balcony to answer. The voice was hoarse, quiet. Her voice. "You think I'm dead," Chloe said. I didn't respond. "You left me to die." Still silent. "You made me write that letter. You—" Her voice cracked. "You're alive," I said calmly, "which means you have a choice." What choice? Disappear for good, or come back and watch everything you ever loved belong to me. Silence. Then she said something I didn't expect. "I'm pregnant." My heart stuttered. "What?" She repeated it, slower, with venom. "You didn't take everything, Emily. You missed one thing, and it's growing inside me." She hung up. I stood on the balcony, the city glittering below, and felt the whole world tilt beneath me. She couldn't be pregnant. She couldn't. But if she was, everything could unravel. I walked back inside. James was half asleep on the couch. I sat beside him, placed my head on his shoulder. He stirred, smiled, wrapped an arm around me. I smiled back, but my mind was already calculating. Because now, I wasn't just playing for vengeance. I was playing for survival. And Chloe's unborn child was a threat I couldn't ignore. She said she was pregnant, but what she didn't know was I had already planned for that. No one plants a seed in my garden unless I control how it grows. I didn't sleep that night. Not because James was snoring beside me like a man finally at peace, but because my mind was spinning so fast it burned. If Chloe was pregnant and alive, then I didn't just have a loose end. I had a fuse lit under the whole damn house. Her phone call could have been a bluff, a last act of desperation, but something in her voice, sharp, certain, told me otherwise. She was a survivor. And worse, she had something now that could make the world care again. A baby changes everything. The next morning, I drove 2 hours to the cabin. The woods were heavier now, wet, cold. Shadows seemed to stalk me between the trees. When I opened the cabin door, I expected her to be weak, pale, desperate. Instead, Chloe was sitting upright, calmly spooning oatmeal from a tin bowl. Her eyes were clearer than I remembered. "I thought you'd come," she said. "How far along?" I asked, skipping the theatrics. She set the spoon down. 8 weeks. "James?" She nodded once. Of course, she hadn't been gone long enough for it to be anyone else. "I could leave you here," I said. "No medical care, no help. You and the baby would fade into the woods. Just a ghost story." She smirked. "You need me alive." "Why?" "Because if I die, everyone will come looking again. A woman fakes her death, then actually dies? That's too poetic, too suspicious." She was smarter now, leaner, harder, a new version of herself, born in silence. "So, what do you want?" I asked, arms folded. She stood, slow and steady. "To make you sweat, like you made me." A long silence stretched between us. Rain tapped against the tin roof above. "I could take you to a clinic," I said flatly. "Handle it." She raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want to be that kind of monster?" I didn't answer, because the truth was, I didn't know. Then I left her with supplies. More food, medicine, prenatal vitamins. A twisted form of compassion, but also a strategy. Because as long as she relied on me, she couldn't ruin me. Yet. Meanwhile, James was spiraling. His license was under review. The hospital board wanted distance, and the whispers in our social circle were growing too loud to ignore. I hosted a dinner party to keep up appearances. 10 guests, 4 bottles of wine, a string quartet in the corner. I wore a red silk dress that clung like wet paint. James looked at me like I was the prize he didn't deserve, but couldn't resist.
"You're glowing lately," his colleague's wife whispered across the table. "New skincare line?" "New lease on life," I replied with a smile. But in the middle of dessert, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again. I excused myself, heart pounding. "Did you tell him?" Chloe asked. No greeting, just acid. Tell him what? About the baby. I stayed quiet. She laughed. Of course not. You're not ready to lose him again. He's already lost, I said. No, she said, not yet, but he will be. And then she added, softly, babies always get the headlines, Emily. No one cares about dead wives, but a missing pregnant woman? That's front page. She hung up. I stood in the hallway for a long time, frozen. Because she was right. I hadn't planned for this. I had erased her life, but not her legacy. And now she was growing one inside her like a time bomb, ticking, waiting, ready to blow everything sky high. That night, I stood by the bedroom window while James slept. The city blinked below, unaware. I touched my reflection. And for the first time since this all began, I felt a tremor of fear. Not of being caught, not of going to prison, but of losing. Because Chloe wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a mother. And mothers, they don't go down without a war.
She carried the child of the man who betrayed me. I carried the weight of the woman who betrayed herself. Only one of us would make it to the end of this story. I spent the next week in two lives. By day, I was Emily Vaughn, the reinvented woman, co-founder of Bellemere Skincare, face of resilience and glamour. By night, I was the keeper of a secret buried 2 hours into the woods, growing like a tumor in a locked cabin. Each time I saw James, I studied his face for signs. Regret, longing, guilt, but never truth. He didn't know Chloe was alive. He didn't know he had a child on the way. He only knew that I had forgiven him, which, of course, I hadn't. I was simply keeping him close, because proximity breeds confession, and soon he would tell me everything I already knew. One evening, he came home with a bottle of champagne and a ridiculous grin. "They cleared me," he said. "Hospital wants me back." I forced a smile. "That's great, James." He poured 2 glasses. "It's the beginning of something better, for both of us." "For all 3 of us," I said softly. He froze mid-sip. "What?" I smiled gently. "I've been thinking, what if we started over, a clean slate, no secrets, no ghosts, just you, me, maybe even a baby?" His eyes widened. "You want kids?" I leaned in, brushing my hand along his jaw. "Don't you?" He swallowed, nodded, but I could see it, the flicker, the fear. Because Chloe had been pregnant, and if he thought I didn't know, then he'd never admit it. But his silence was as loud as a confession. 2 days later, I visited the cabin again. Chloe wasn't surprised to see me. She looked stronger somehow. Not physically, she was still pale, thinner than she should have been, but her eyes were sharper. "You look tired," she said. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened the bag of groceries without a word. "Prenatal checkups don't do themselves," she added. "I brought you vitamins." Not the same as an ultrasound. She was baiting me, testing how far I'd let this go. "You could come back," I said casually. "Tell the world the truth. Admit the affair. Explain the fake suicide. I'm sure they'd welcome you back with open arms." She laughed bitterly. "And James, he thinks you're dead. And you think I'll let him hold his child while pretending I never existed?" I met her gaze, cold and still. "You won't be holding anything unless you shut up and stay quiet." Chloe exhaled slowly. "You can't keep this up forever." "No," I said, "but I don't have to. I just need a little more time." She tilted her head. "Time for what?" "To make sure he suffers." That night, I opened a new anonymous email account and sent James a message from a friend. It included an altered photo of Chloe, just enough grain, enough shadow to look like a security camera screenshot. Caption: "She's not dead. Ask your wife where she really is." Then I waited. James didn't confront me right away. Instead, he withdrew. watched me when he thought I wasn't looking, checked my phone when I left it on the counter, stayed up late scrolling through old pictures of Chloe. On the fourth night, I caught him sneaking into my office. I stood in the doorway in silence as he rifled through his drawer. "Looking for her?" I asked. He jumped, startled. "Emily. She's dead, remember?" He hesitated. "Someone sent me something." "Something?" "A photo. Said she might be alive." I walked toward him slowly. "Do you believe it?" "I don't know what to believe anymore," he said, eyes darting across my face. I leaned in close, too close. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you ruined your marriage, and hers." Then I handed him the photo. The original. His eyes narrowed. "You sent it?" "I wanted to see how far you'd go to find her," I said calmly. "And now I know." He stared at me, accused me with his silence, but said nothing, because he still didn't know what I was capable of. The next morning, I got a message on my burner phone from Chloe. One word: ultrasound. She wasn't bluffing anymore. She was documenting, preparing, which meant she was planning to return, not as a ghost, but as the mother of his child. And I'd have to decide just how far I was willing to go to stop her, because secrets are heavy, but unborn truths, they're the ones that drag you under. I heard the heartbeat, a soft, rhythmic drum of something I didn't create, and for the first time since this began, I wasn't sure I could go through with it. The ultrasound arrived in a manila envelope. No return address, no note. Just a grainy image printed on glossy black paper, like every other expectant mother receives. The white arch of a womb, a tiny shape floating inside, and a date scribbled in the corner: 11 weeks. I stared at it for a long time, not because it shocked me anymore, but because it made her real again. Chloe, alive, carrying the one thing I couldn't erase. I kept the image tucked inside my nightstand. James never asked about it. If he saw it, he said nothing. Maybe he was afraid of the answer, or maybe he already knew. Some part of him had always known he left something unfinished with her. That part of him had returned every time he touched me now, carefully, almost cautiously, as if he didn't know who he was holding. Because he didn't. And I liked it that way. But the photo changed things. It made me feel something I hadn't felt in months. Not guilt, not regret, just doubt. Not about Chloe, about the baby. That weekend, I returned to the cabin. I brought her prenatal supplies, fresh clothes, and a solar-powered radio. Chloe looked better, stronger. Her skin no longer dull, her eyes clearer. Pregnancy had changed her, grounded her. She wasn't the girl who smiled at my husband's lies anymore. She was a woman now, a mother, and mothers are dangerous. She didn't say thank you when I handed her the supplies. She simply turned on the radio and let music fill the silence. A jazz station, smooth and melancholy. "Why the visit?" she asked, pouring water into a glass. I held up the ultrasound. "This changes everything." She nodded. "I don't want your life anymore," she said. "You took it. Fine, keep it. Then what do you want?" "My name back," she replied, "and my child's future." "You'll never be Chloe again, not after everything I've done." "Then I'll be someone else, but I will exist, and so will they." She rubbed her stomach gently, instinctively. I sat across from her. "We could coexist," I offered, "in secret, separate. You raise the child, I keep the life." She laughed, sharp. "You think I trust you with silence after what you've done?" I said nothing, because I didn't need her trust. I only needed her fear. Later that night, I walked alone in the woods behind the cabin. The trees whispered. The air felt colder than usual, like the earth itself was holding its breath. That was when I realized something else. She had hope again. And hope is a dangerous thing to give someone you've buried, because it gives them the strength to claw back to the surface. When I returned, Chloe was asleep. I stood over her, staring down at the bump beginning to form beneath the fabric of her sweatshirt. So small, so fragile, so undeniably human. And suddenly, the storm I had controlled for so long, every calculated move, every rehearsed line, every forged signature, began to slip from my fingers. What if I didn't go through with it? What if I let her live? What if she came back? Would James choose her again? Would the world see me as the villain? Would I become just another broken woman no one believed? I didn't have answers, only a choice. And that night, as I drove back into the city, headlights slicing through the dark, I whispered aloud to myself, "Do not feel."
Because the moment you feel for the person you buried, you become the one 6 feet under. He said he wanted closure, but I knew what he really wanted, confirmation, the kind only blood can give, and blood never lies. James sat across from me at the kitchen island. His hands were still damp from washing dishes, his sleeves rolled up like the domestic man he never was. But his eyes, they were elsewhere. "Did you ever think," he said slowly, "what we'd be like if none of it had happened?" I looked at him, really looked. The same man who once kissed me like I was air. The same man who later whispered another woman's name into hotel pillows. "You mean if you hadn't slept with Chloe?" He flinched, a small involuntary twitch. "I mean if we'd stayed clean." I took a long sip of wine. "Clean isn't real," I said, "only hidden." He nodded slowly, then slid a small white envelope across the counter. I didn't touch it. "What is this?" "I got a test." "What kind of test?" He swallowed. "DNA." The world stilled. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "She said she was pregnant once. Chloe. I didn't believe her. But now?" He looked up. "There's a file circulating. Ultrasound. Unmarked. But the date, the angle, I recognized it. I think she sent it before she disappeared." My heart pounded in my ears. "You think she had your child?" He nodded. "And I think they're alive." I didn't speak. I didn't blink. I had planned for many outcomes, but not this. James taking control of the narrative. That night, I waited until he fell asleep, then opened the envelope. Inside was a printout. No name on the file, but a match. Paternity probability 99.98%. The child was his, which meant Chloe had already done what I feared. She'd found a way to submit the test. And if he had the results, then she'd gotten them to someone else too. Someone beyond me. Someone safe. She was playing smarter, and I was falling behind. The next morning, I made 2 calls. The first was to a private investigator. I want to track down a woman, mid-20s, possibly using a fake name, pregnant, last known location upstate New York. Is she a threat? She's a mirror, and I want to break it. The second call was to Detective Michelle Reyes. "Detective, I think I've seen someone who looks a lot like Chloe Bellemere." By the end of the week, I had new information. Chloe had checked into a rural women's clinic under the name Claire Bennett. Blood work, ultrasound, vitamins, everything real, everything traceable. She was no longer hiding. She was preparing. James didn't speak of the DNA test again, but his behavior changed. He pulled away. Less touches, less warmth, like he was grieving something without telling me what. He wasn't grieving Chloe, he was grieving choice. Because if she came back with a baby, he wouldn't get to choose who the world sided with. It would be her, always her. One night I left early, told him I was going to a charity gala. Instead, I drove to the cabin. But when I arrived, the door was open. The inside was empty. Chloe was gone. She'd left behind her blanket, a broken cup, and a single note on the mattress, written in red marker. "You erased my name, but I gave life to yours." I read it 3 times, and then I screamed, because now she wasn't hiding anymore.
She was hunting. And for the first time since this began, I wasn't the only predator in the story. The first time I saw her on screen, I didn't scream. I smiled. Because only fools scream when they're caught. The dangerous ones, they evolve. The video dropped at 9:17 a.m. on a Monday. No warning, no teaser. Just a raw clip posted to a blog that had once called Chloe a social climber with perfect eyebrows. Now they called her the woman who came back from the dead. The video was shaky, handheld, shot in a dimly lit room with plain beige walls.
She sat in front of the camera, no makeup, eyes dark with sleepless fire. She looked thin, but sharp, the kind of sharp that could bleed. "My name," she said slowly, "is Chloe Bellemere, and I'm not dead." My phone exploded. Calls, texts, headlines. Breaking, Chloe Bellemere alive, says she was held against her will. She didn't say my name. She didn't need to. Her eyes said everything. Her words were calculated, smart, nearly perfect. I faked my death to escape a situation that became psychologically dangerous. I'm not ready to say names, but I will if I have to. Every syllable was a knife to my carefully stitched web. She wasn't just alive. She was alive on her terms. James watched the clip in silence. I stood behind him, watching him. He didn't blink, didn't breathe, just stared at the screen like it might crawl out and strangle him. When it ended, he turned to me. "She's back." I nodded. "Where is she, Emily?" I tilted my head, just a little. "Do you think I know?" "I think you always know." He didn't say it with hate. He said it with recognition. The man finally realizing his wife had never been the woman he thought. Too late, darling. Far too late. That night, I went to the cabin again. Empty, of course. But I had a feeling she'd left something else. She had. Under the floorboard. A burner phone. Already turned on. Already recording. The moment I picked it up, it rang. I answered. "I wondered how long it would take," Chloe said. "You're not safe," I said calmly. "Neither are you," she replied. "But the difference is, I have the truth now, and I don't need to hide it anymore." "You think the world will believe you?" "They already do," she whispered, "because they want to." I didn't respond. "And when they see you for what you are, Emily, the woman who stole my face, my voice, my place? You gave those things away the moment you opened your legs to my husband." She was quiet for a beat. Then she said, "I'm naming the baby Grace," and hung up. Grace. A word I hadn't felt in years. A name I couldn't stop repeating in my head. She was painting herself as a mother, a victim, a woman reborn through suffering. And the world loves that story more than any truth, more than betrayal, more than revenge, more than me. Detective Reyes arrived the next day. No appointment, no preamble, just a knock and a badge. "Can we talk?" she asked, already stepping inside. I said nothing, just led her to the kitchen. She sat, I poured tea. "You've seen the video," she said. I nodded. She mentioned being held against her will. She didn't say who. "No," the detective said, watching me over the rim of her cup. "She didn't. But you think it's me," I said. "I think a woman who faked her death doesn't get to play the perfect victim." I raised an eyebrow. Interesting stance, not very detective-like. "I follow patterns, Emily, and yours is getting messy." I leaned back in my chair. "What exactly are you accusing me of?" "Nothing," she said, standing. "Yet." Then she paused. "One more thing. She's pressing charges for identity theft." She turned to leave. "By the way," she added, "she's staying somewhere safe, with someone who used to love her." I knew what that meant. She was with James, or worse, someone new, someone who believed her, someone who could help her finish what I started. The war wasn't over. It had just gone public. And now the world would have to choose, not between right and wrong, but between two women, one who survived and one who refused to disappear. They didn't need a courtroom. They had TikTok, and the verdict was already in. America loves a woman with a baby and a broken past. I was neither. The first major podcast episode dropped on Thursday. The Real Chloe Bellemere. 1.2 million views in 24 hours. By Friday, there were dozens more.
She was brave. She was clever. She was a survivor. They played her voice over soft piano, shared screenshots of her baby bump, analyzed every flicker of her fingers in that viral video like sacred scripture. They made her a movement, and made me a villain. The woman who stole a life. Wife turned impersonator. From betrayed to dangerous. They took pieces of me and turned them into monsters. And James? He didn't defend me. He didn't say a word. I came home from a board meeting, one where half the room couldn't look me in the eye, and found him in the kitchen, cooking, acting normal, like we were still playing house. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. You've seen it all, haven't you? He didn't turn around. Yes. And? He stirred the sauce like it mattered. She's smart. That's all you have to say? He sighed. I don't know what's real anymore, Emily. That's funny, I said coldly, because I do. I know who stood by your side when your license was at risk. I know who protected your reputation, rebuilt your image, saved your damn career. He finally turned, sauce-stained spoon in hand. And I know who kept a woman locked in a basement for weeks. Silence. The kind that makes the walls shake. You think I'm a monster? I said. He didn't answer. Which was answer enough. That night, I packed a bag. Not because I was leaving him, but because I needed distance to prepare for what came next. The world believed Chloe's story. But stories change, especially when you flip the narrator. I booked a suite in the city, high above the skyline. Glass walls, expensive silence. It reminded me of who I was before I let men define me. Then I got to work. First, I leaked Chloe's sealed legal records, a petty shoplifting charge from college, a restraining order filed by a past roommate, old emails, salty, manipulative, the kind that revealed her taste for control. I sent it all to one gossip site with a single line. Every victim has a version. This is hers. Within hours, the tide shifted, just slightly. Who is Chloe Bellemere really? The cracks in the perfect survivor. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make people pause. Then I did something harder, something calculated. I sent James a package, no return address. Inside, a recording. Chloe's voice, from the basement, from the nights she cried. The ones I recorded, not for evidence, just for power. I knew he'd listen. And I knew what he'd hear. Please, Emily, just let me go. I'll disappear, I swear. You can keep everything. I don't even love him anymore. I just want to live. It wouldn't clear me, but it would complicate her. And in this war, complication was survival. The next morning, I received a knock. Hotel staff? No. Detective Reyes. I opened the door in a silk robe, holding coffee, completely unfazed. Another interview? I asked. Actually, she said, Chloe's lawyer filed an emergency order. For full custody. My blood ran cold. She's claiming you're a danger to the child? And she's naming James as the father. I stood still.
She's trying to take everything, I whispered. Reyes narrowed her eyes. Or maybe she's just taking it back. I walked to the window, looked down at the tiny cars crawling through the streets like ants unaware of war above. She wants a courtroom, I said quietly. She'll get one. Just remember, Reyes said, already turning to leave, courtrooms don't run on truth. They run on narrative. And hers is better. I didn't sleep that night. I opened every file I had, every photo, every text, every lie I could expose. Because if I was going down, she was going with me. One life was never going to be enough for either of us. Not anymore. Not anymore. They called it a custody hearing, but everyone in that courtroom knew what it really was. A trial of character, of blood, of truth twisted until it screamed. The courtroom was cold. Not in temperature, but in atmosphere. Silent, watching, waiting. The kind of room where reputations are peeled off like dead skin. Chloe sat at the opposite table, belly prominent now beneath a pale blue maternity dress, her hair tied back, minimal makeup. She looked saintly, fragile, pregnant with more than just a child, pregnant with sympathy. James sat beside her. Of course he did. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't with me. He hadn't shown up with me in weeks. And that silence said everything. The judge entered. Gavel. Silence. Words I barely heard. What followed wasn't a trial. It was a chess match played with stories. Her attorney painted her as the phoenix. The young woman manipulated and stolen from, who faked her own death in a desperate bid for freedom. They called her courageous. They called me calculating. They played the audio of her crying in the basement, again, until I could feel it echo in my bones. She was held against her will, her lawyer said, emotionally tortured, isolated, replaced. That word hit hardest, because it was true. I had replaced her, and I'd done it well, too well. Then it was my turn. My lawyer, sharp, silver-haired, and cold-blooded, presented the other side. The Chloe who conned her way into luxury. The Chloe who seduced a married man. The Chloe who abandoned therapy records, fled the state, falsified social media narratives, and accepted money from multiple lovers. She weaponized vulnerability, my lawyer said, and now she's weaponizing motherhood. We submitted texts, email trails, witness statements, proof of her staging emotional breakdowns for attention. Even her old roommate testified, shaking, about Chloe once faking a miscarriage to manipulate an ex. It rattled her. For the first time since she re-emerged, she looked breakable again. James didn't speak. He was called as a witness, but he refused. "I'm not here to take sides," he said. Coward. At recess, I passed her in the hallway. Just us. No cameras, no judges, no attorneys. "You want the world to see you as new," I said softly. "But you and I both know you're just reinventing the same lie." She smiled, calm, controlled. "Funny, I was about to say the same to you." She stepped closer. "I'm going to raise this child, with or without your approval." "I'm not here to approve," I whispered. "I'm here to win." Chloe leaned in. "Then you should have killed me when you had the chance." Then she walked away. Later that afternoon, the judge called both attorneys to chambers. An hour passed. Then the ruling came. Not final custody, not yet, but an emergency restraining order against me. I wasn't allowed within 500 feet of Chloe or the child, once born. It was a small win, but it felt like the first domino in the fall. That night, I returned to the penthouse alone. No James, no press. Just me and the noise in my head. I poured wine, sat on the edge of the bed once mine, and stared at the mirror for a long time.
Chloe had taken her identity back. Publicly, legally. She had James, she had the child, she had the world. But I had the truth. And if the courts wouldn't hear it, then the world would. Because I hadn't lost yet. I still had one move left. And it would be the one they'd never forget. They wanted her version of the truth. So I gave them mine. Louder, sharper, crueler. Not to clear my name, but to burn hers. I waited until midnight to upload the footage. Not just the basement tapes, but everything. Raw, uncut, time-stamped. A montage of the real Chloe Bellemere. Her manipulation, her confessions, her threats, her cries, her deals. I edited nothing. Let the world see her without music, without filters, without pity. Then I paired it with my narration. Just my voice. Calm, controlled, unapologetic.
I didn't kidnap her. I contained her. I didn't erase her. I responded. To betrayal, to lies, to being replaced. This isn't about right and wrong. This is about what happens when someone thinks your life is disposable. The video was 17 minutes long. And by dawn, it had over 6 million views. The backlash was immediate. Not just for her, but for me. Split down the middle. Some called me brave, a woman pushed too far. Others called me a sociopath, dangerous, obsessive. I knew the risk. But this wasn't about clearing my name. It was about infecting hers. Chloe responded with a live stream, her face pale, swollen with grief and fury. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She told her story again, but this time with rage. She broke me, then tried to convince the world I asked for it. She announced she was leaving the city, for good. Said she would raise Grace far from all of us, far from James, far from courts and cameras. She looked directly into the lens when she said, "I forgive her, but I'll never let her near my daughter." And the world? The world erupted. Forgiveness made her invincible, again. James came to my door that night. No warning. I opened the door in silence. He looked older than I remembered, defeated. "You knew I'd come," he said. "Because you always crawl back," I replied. He stepped in, closed the door behind him. "I watched the video," he said, "all of it." "Did it change anything?" He hesitated. "It made it worse." I tilted my head. "For me?" "For me." Then he stepped closer, his voice low. "She's gone. Took the baby. Said I'll never see them." "And that's my fault?" "No," he said quietly. "It's mine." He looked up at me with eyes that used to hold charm. Now they held something else, emptiness. "I destroyed 3 lives," he said, "including yours." I poured him a drink. "You corrected." I corrected. He raised an eyebrow. "You forgot about yourself." He stayed the night, not in my bed, on the couch, drinking, whispering apologies into an empty glass. And for once, I didn't care. He was a shadow now, and I no longer lived in the dark. The next morning, I received a letter, mailed, handwritten, from Chloe. It read, "Emily, I've left the country. Don't try to find me. You won. Keep the city. Keep your brand. Keep James. They're all yours now. But Grace is mine. And one day she'll ask about you. I'll tell her the truth. The complicated kind. The kind that doesn't fit in courtrooms or interviews. The kind that explains what happens when 2 women are forced to become monsters to survive a man's betrayal. See." I folded the letter, slid it into the drawer beside the DNA test, the ultrasound, and the last Polaroid of James and me smiling at a wedding neither of us meant. Then I opened the window, breathed. For the first time in over a year, I wasn't chasing or running. I was still. But I knew, stillness is never the end. It's the moment before the next storm. They called me names: villain, manipulator, monster,
But none of them called me what I really was, free. 6 months later, the city barely remembered. The scandal was replaced by new ones. The podcasts moved on. The gossip sites found younger victims. Even James disappeared, moved out of state, changed hospitals, changed names. We didn't speak again after the letter I sent him, 1 sentence long. You lost your daughter the same way you lost me, through silence. I kept the apartment, sold the skincare brand, deleted every social account tied to Chloe's face. Then, one morning, I walked into a salon and said, "Make me someone new." They cut my hair short, dyed it black. I looked in the mirror and finally saw someone I didn't recognize, and for the first time, I smiled. I was no longer Emily Vaughn, no longer Chloe Bellemere. I was what came after. Some nights I dream of Grace, not as mine, not as James's, just as hers.
I see her in the sunlight, climbing trees. I hear her laugh, like Chloe used to, before she became the woman who walked into my life and left it burning. I wonder if she'll look like her mother, or her father, or maybe, if the universe has a dark sense of humor, like me. But I don't feel regret when I dream. I feel peace, because Grace will grow up knowing the truth, not the courtroom version, not the podcast version, the complicated one, the one only survivors understand. On the anniversary of the video drop, I received a package, no return address. Inside, a single photograph. A woman on a beach, hair in the wind, a child holding her hand. Grace. A second photo beneath it, the child alone, building a sandcastle, smiling. On the back, in Chloe's handwriting, one line. She'll never know you, but you'll always be part of her story. I stood in my kitchen holding that photo for a long time. Tears didn't come. I'd cried all the versions of myself dry. But I felt something else. Not closure, not redemption, just completion. The ending of one story, the beginning of another. That night, I packed a suitcase. No destination, no plan. Just a need to start where no one knew my name. Because names are fragile. And sometimes, to save yourself, you have to steal your own life back, one piece at a time.